can do to make sure that we reduce our pollution so that we don't have as many asthma attacks in the future. And we're also going to talk about the New Jersey Environmental Justice Rule. We have several presenters today. Kim Gaddy from Clean Water Action, who's the New Jersey and National Environmental Justice Director. We have Dr. Nicky Sheats from the New Jersey Environmental Justice Alliance. And we have JV, who's with the Ironbound Community Corporation. All of our groups working together got the EJ law passed and the rule adopted. So we're very excited to be able to present to you what you can do to make this rule come alive. So I'm going to turn it over to Kim Gaddy to go next.
Thank you, Amy, and good evening, everyone. As you can see, our theme this year is asthma care for all. And that is important because typically you actually see more incidents of asthma in communities of people of color and low income. And so the theme is so fitting this year. It's an inclusive theme and it's really important. And it ties into the New Jersey Environmental Justice Rule that so many of us have been fighting for the last 14 years. And so this annual event is to raise awareness about people suffering from asthma. As a mother of children who have asthma, and as a youngster, I had asthma. Asthma never leaves you. It is something that is a chronic disorder. You learn how to manage your asthma. So I was able to take the right kind of medication. I was able to participate in sports. My asthma was directly linked to my allergies. So I had to see a doctor every week and get shots until my lungs was able to adapt to the environment. And so it is really, really important that you understand what triggers your asthma and how you can prevent it. I'm going to talk about a couple statistics that are related to World Asthma Day 2023, and I must apologize. We had two doctors that was going to present today, but they had an emergency situation, and so unfortunately, we will not have immunologists speaking today. But if you have any questions or concerns, please put them in the chat. We will forward those questions to them and they will respond. 25 million Americans have asthma, and it's a prevalent problem worldwide. As stated, asthma is a chronic disease of the airways. Inflammation occurs in the airways that lead to your lungs, causing blockage and breathing difficulties. If you ever see anyone experience an asthmatic attack, you will see that you're really helpless. There's nothing you can do to prevent them from having that attack. What I did when my children was experiencing, I would get them to cough, because if they can cough, they're opening up the airway until we can then get them to the hospital and to the nebulizer or to the inhaler. So that is really, really important to know. The death rate from asthma has nearly doubled since the 1980s, but the conditions are not new. In 2019, there was over 460,000 deaths that occurred. In New Jersey, 600,000 individuals live with asthma each and every day. It wasn't until 1956 that the actual inhaler that we use was actually developed. Here are some interesting facts about asthma. 1 in 13 Americans have asthma. In Newark, New Jersey, 1 in 4 have asthma. About 5.1 million children under the age of 18 have asthma. Women are 3 times more likely to be hospitalized due to asthma-related problems more than men. Asthma kills on an average 10 Americans per day. 8.4% of boys have asthma, while 5.5% of girls have asthma. The majority of the burden of asthma, morbidity, and mortality increases in low and middle income communities and countries. And so that's why this topic today regarding the environmental justice rule is so critical, because we understand that those individuals who live in overburdened communities that are impacted by cumulative impacts of pollution suffer the most from asthma. And so we want to connect asthma care for all and environmental justice for all. And so I'm going to turn it over to our next speaker, Dr. Nicky Sheats from New Jersey Environmental Justice Alliance, to give you some background on the law and steps you can take. Dr. Sheats. You're on mute. I think you're on mute, Nicky.
Yeah, I've only done this 1,000 times. I still go on mute. So can you hear me? Kim, can you hear me?
You're good, Nicky.
Good, okay, good. Well, thanks to Clean Water Action for organizing this, for inviting me to speak. Thanks particularly to Kim. And I'm gonna show you a PowerPoint. Some of you have probably seen before. I should apologize for that, but I won't. I like to have new audiences to talk to, even if some of you have seen it before. So Kim has given me my marching orders. And I'm gonna talk a little bit about cumulative impacts in general, and then talk about the New Jersey EJ and cumulative impacts law. So here is a formal definition for cumulative impacts that we've been using in New Jersey, the EJ community and allies have been using in New Jersey. And that is, cumulative impacts are the risk and impacts caused by multiple pollutants, usually emitted by multiple sources of pollution in a community, and their interaction with each other and with social vulnerabilities that exist in a community. So it's the pollutants, the multiple pollutants that are emitted by multiple sources, and the impacts and risks they cause both individually and when they interact with each other and with social vulnerabilities. Now in EJ communities, communities of color, low-income communities, these social vulnerabilities are frequently rooted in race and income. And cumulative impacts have been a very tough problem to address for several reasons. One is because our country tries to regulate pollution by setting individual standards for polluting. So the country goes, or a nation goes from pollutant to pollutant, sets an individual standard. The problem with that is that typically government, whether it's federal level or state level, will tell communities that are complaining about an additional polluting facility being sited in their community and telling government not to let that happen, a lot of times by not issuing an air pollution permit. Oftentimes government would tell communities, well, there's nothing we can do about this because the modeling of the pollution that's usually done by the polluting facility, by the way, doesn't show that any individual standards are being violated. Of course, the problem here is that the individual standards are not taking into account the super pollution, the total amount of pollution that exists in neighborhoods. And the community will typically respond, but wait a minute, you're not taking into account all these other polluting facilities. And by the way, when we breathe in pollution, it's not like we have compartments in our lungs where the pollutants go, where the particulate matter goes into one compartment and the sulfur dioxide goes in another and the nitrogen dioxide goes in another. They all mix into our lungs, but you're not taking that into account. And before the New Jersey EJ and cumulative impacts law, that facility would get a permit anyway. And we're hoping that won't happen under the law. The other problem, one of the other problems connected with cumulative impacts is its association with race. And we all know that in our country, when race enters into the equation, it becomes a very difficult problem to solve, or even more difficult than it was before, because we still haven't solved our racial problem in general in the country, nor have we solved it when it comes to environmental justice. But we're working on it, and this law will help. So here are figures I show all the time. These two figures were produced by the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection in 2009. And they wanted to see the relationship between cumulative impacts, race, and income. In this instance, cumulative impacts can be thought of as a very rough estimate of the total amount of pollution in New Jersey neighborhoods. So New Jersey DEP assigned a cumulative impact score to every neighborhood in New Jersey and to see the relationship with the total estimate of pollution in New Jersey neighborhoods. They graphed the cumulative impact scores against race and income and look at the outcome. The top figure shows as the number of people of color living in New Jersey neighborhoods increases, so is the estimate of the amount of pollution, and the same is true for people with low income. As the number of low income residents in New Jersey neighborhoods increases, the estimate of the amount of pollution also increases. And this is providing evidence that if you live in New Jersey, the amount of pollution in your neighborhood is connected to the color of your skin, the amount of money in your pocket, and of course, this goes against everything that the state and country at least claim that they stand for. And what we're worried about is what Kim talked about at the top of the program, that is connected to health, detrimental health outcomes that particularly plague of color and low-income neighborhoods. So we have these these disparities in health that exist in the United States that are rooted in race and income. And the high levels of cumulative impacts are contributing to those health disparities. And we want to do something about them. So enter the New Jersey EJ and cumulative impacts law that we fought for so many years. As Kim indicated, we were trying to address these cumulative impact problem since 2007, roughly. And this law was adopted in 2020. And you see in this slide, the guts of the law. First, the law defines an overburdened neighborhood. It says that any census block group, and block groups are smaller than census tracts, any block groups that are 40% of color, or, and that's important, or 35% low income, or whose residents are, where at least 40% of the residents are of limited English proficiency, those block groups are defined as overburdened communities. In the EJ movement, we would say they are environmental justice communities, because you notice that no environmental indicator is used at this point to define them, but we'll accept overburdened community. And then the law goes on to say, if a polluting facility, a major polluting facility, is seeking a pollution permit in one of these overburdened communities, then they have to do an EJ analysis. And if this EJ analysis shows that by granting the pollution permit, environmental and public health stressors, cumulative environmental and public health stressors, would be higher in the host community than in other communities in New Jersey, then if that is true, then if the permit is for a new facility, it shall be denied, it must be denied. And if it's for a permit renewal or for a facility that wants to expand, even if granting the permit would then make stressors higher in the host community, the permit can't be denied, but conditions can be placed on the permit by the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection that would mitigate the amount of the pollution. And here's the wording from the law that talks about what the EJ analysis would answer, the question it would answer. The question it answers is, would granting the permit cause or contribute to adverse cumulative environmental and public health stressors in the overburdened community that are higher than those borne by other communities, right? Would granting the permit cause stress to be higher in the host community than in other communities? So right now, you probably want to know what those stressors are. Well, here's a general description of them. There's sources of pollution, including point sources of water pollution and air pollution, and conditions that can cause health problems. There are 26 of them. And I won't show you all of them, but here are 12 of them. And you see the first two, ozone and PM 2.5. PM 2.5 is airborne particulate matter that is smaller than 2.5 microns in diameter. Unfortunately, we're breathing it in right now. But types of pollution, and then you see cancer risk, right? If you look at 5, number 5 there. You see non-diesel cancer. Number 4, you see non-diesel PM cancer risk. Number 5, you see NADA, in other words, health risks that are non-cancer, right? Not diseases that are not cancer. And number 4, you see diesel PM cancer risk. Then look at number 6. So you have types of pollution, you have disease rates, and then look at number 6, and you have the number of polluting facilities that have air permits, the number per square mile. So you have different types of stressors. And the stressors were defined by, sorry, I went the wrong way, you all. The stresses were determined by regulations that were released recently that just became effective on April 17th. And these regulations determined the universe of stressors. In other words, it defined all the stressors. And it also defined how to, or explained how to do the EJ analysis. One more question that Kim made sure to tell me the answer is what types of facilities are covered by the law. And so you see them here: major source of air pollution, incinerators, sludge processing facilities, sewage plants. You can read the rest of them yourself. One that was really important to us were major sources of air pollution, because these sources are typically ubiquitous in our communities and causing a lot of health problems. And a major source is defined as being a facility that emits at least 100 tons of pollution, of air pollution per year. Now, look, the law does not cover everything. And some of the things that are missing that are important are warehousing and the ports. So this law is a good start. But we always understood the law would not be a silver bullet, that there would have to be other laws and regulations and policies that we need to pass along with this new EJ and cumulative impacts law if we're going to get where we want to go. And that's to make a significant impact, significant decrease in the disproportionate pollution loads we find in EJ communities. So we've coined the term that we're going to need cumulative policies for cumulative impacts, and this law is a good start. And with that, I look forward to questions. And Kim, I'm going to stop sharing and turn it back over to you.
And thank you, Dr. Sheats. And now I'm going to turn it over to JV. She will share her slides. JV is with Ironbound Community Corp. JV.
Thank you, Ravi. Sharing screen now. So folks, I can see you, and that is helpful in case my audio cuts out or if you'd like me to repeat anything or say anything differently. In the next few minutes, I'm just going to talk a little bit in a zoomed in way, talking about an example of a frontline community, which is where a lot of us live and work that are on the panel. And Newark is a really perfect example of the kind of community that the environmental justice law is developed to protect. And like we'd mentioned, like Dr. Sheats mentioned, the environmental justice law is not something that will undo decades of environmental racism that a lot of our communities that are low wealth, Black and brown, and likely also can be linguistically isolated, which is what is the circumstance for the Ironbound in Newark. So I'm just going to be sharing some visuals really to talk a bit about the community and what we have been experiencing in terms of environmental pollution and its health impacts directly to the community for the last several decades. The Ironbound is known as the Ironbound because of a history of manufacturing, but also the railway tracks. We have now modern day highways, the port systems that were mentioned, actually an airplane route that flies overhead about every minute and a half as well, to give you just an idea of what the experience of EJ looks like, the environmental justice experience for the community itself. Oh, one moment. So I'm not sure that anyone can see, so I'll try resharing. Can folks see now? Okay, great, wonderful. So it's also helpful to see folks' faces. We didn't miss anything, it was just the title. So this is a bit of a visual, as I was explaining, of what is the experience of environmental injustice in a community. We talk a lot in terms, but what environmental justice means for a lot of us in frontline communities is who the people are that live here and who are experiencing really how policy affects people's everyday life. So in Newark, there has been a 30+ year, and I'm sure even longer history of being organized for environmental justice as a community. This is an image from actually the Newark DEP hearing for the environmental justice law. There was a public comment period where the DEP was traveling to get public comment from community members. One of the stops was NJIT and Newark. And just to show how much this law means to communities that have been working for over 12 years to get it and almost 2 years for the rules to be released, is this example. There were over 300 community members, allies, people from in Newark definitely, but also people from outside of Newark that attended this hearing and shared over 2 hours worth of testimony in support of the environmental justice law and against any loopholes that would not be able to actually realize itself as a protection for the community. This is one example. In the 4 square mile neighborhood of the Ironbound, we have 3 fossil fuel power plants. These are some beautiful pictures, but this is not a beautiful experience to have 3 fossil fuel power plants in less than 4 square miles. And this is a picture of actually another fossil fuel facility from our local sewage processing plant, who has proposed to add a 4th power plant in Newark. And so in these minutes, I do hope to talk about some of the facilities that have been able to renew their permits before the environmental justice law was realized and before the rules were released. And what that means for us moving forward. We're grateful to have the law, but we know that there's still some work to do as these facilities look to renew their permits. The image that we have here is of New Jersey's largest garbage incinerator. This is Covanta. And Covanta, the image on the top left, is of the pink and purple plume that was also seen coming out of the smokestack of Covanta. And so I personally think of Covanta as a mascot, so to say, of the facilities that are targeting our community and many communities that look like ours throughout the state. Covanta serves over 27 municipalities outside of Newark and receives over 50% of its garbage, which you can imagine are actually tons and tons on diesel trucks and their emissions that are entering into the Newark community that's coming all the way from New York. So to put that more simply, over 50% of its garbage is being trucked in from New York City. And the folks who are at the sacrifice end of it are people in communities that are typically low income, people of color communities. So for the example of how we are organizing around these many facilities, for example, just last year, we had the permit renewal of several fossil fuel facilities and our garbage incinerator in community. So they have technically administratively been completed before the environmental justice rules can really be applied to them. And so what Dr. Sheats spoke about earlier is giving the DEP the power to just say no more toxic industries in a community that has already been impacted by far too many. Unfortunately, a lot of the facilities that are already operating in Newark and in many communities are, so to say, exempt because they're not applying for permits for the first time. This is just an image of some of the actions that we take marching to some of these facilities yearly. Like Ms. Gaddy mentioned earlier, we have one of the highest rates in Newark of asthma in the entire state, and by no coincidence, a history of zoning policy and toxic industries that have targeted us as well. So these are just some images to take a look. But in terms of how we have, oh, that was a little surprise one. In terms of how we have organized around these facilities and how we will continue to organize around these facilities is that 3 fossil fuel power plants for our community is obviously too much. We did talk about asthma. We've seen in looking at some of the stressors that the EJ law looks at. It's not just limited to asthma, but it's also including cardiovascular health issues and some of the things that is experienced in our communities in terms of public health and the impact of emissions or pollution exposure include cancer, as mentioned, reproductive issues, gynecological issues, diabetes, all to name a few. And this is all part of a zoomed out lens of where all of this is coming from. We can point to the actors, we can point to some of the facilities like the garbage incinerator or the power plants, but we are also thinking about what policy, now that we have the EJ law, can we work towards in terms of being able to regulate, for example, diesel truck emissions or work that I am not the expert on, but around ports. So this is an example of Passaic Valley Sewage Commission is that power plant that already exists in Newark, but it was seeking before the environmental justice law rules were released to propose a 4th power plant in Newark. So one of the strategies that we looked at was having a public health professional press conference. If you've noticed, this is Dr. Sheats being interviewed. And we had folks come out from different arenas of the public health and health professional sectors, including school psychologists, to talk about the experience of having an airplane fly over or having to close your window when you experience a bad smell in the community. And I know for a lot of us, we have smelled at one point in our lives something bad in New Jersey. So this is one method and a lot of the allied work that happens around that. And so all this to say that for the facilities that have been able to go through before the EJ law, what we will have to continue doing is providing that public comment. If the NJDEP, for example, is encouraged enough to ask the facility to invest at possibly a very expensive level technology to mitigate odor or to mitigate one of the reasons why it's such a large emitter of air pollution, they can technically be forced to move in that direction and possibly by coincidence shut down. But what we do know, at least, because that is going to still be up to the DEP at its discretion, is that showing up to these public hearings, the permit renewals, submitting letters are all still our methods of making noise about these facilities that are looking to, again, renew themselves in our communities and have been able to before the EJ law took effect. If the DEP were to receive hundreds of public comments talking about a certain health issue or about something that is wrong with the facility. For example, our garbage incinerator already has over 800 air permit violations on record and are one of the top 5 emitters of lead, mercury, and arsenic in our entire state. And so if the DEP were to receive letters about the concern around this for many different reasons, that would be something that could possibly urge the DEP to move in the direction of not renewing that permit and applying stronger standards locally so that the facility has to work in a way that's not as harmful or not harmful to the community. So a bit more on what we've looked to. We've been able to get a lot of media attention around this proposal for a 4th facility. This has been media that has been following this story for now going closer to 2 years. And one other strategy has been to talk to our local officials, which if we get much out of the messaging here, it's to get our local elected folks involved. In Newark, we've been able to get the Essex County Environmental Commission, as well as all of City Council, Mayor Raz Baraka, and Senator Teresa Ruiz, for example, to sign off on letters opposing the building of this 4th fossil fuel power plant in the community. And another thing that has been really powerful in this strategy, as we're waiting to see what does happen with the Passaic Valley Sewage Commission and this 4th power plant, is the solidarity that has been statewide. So we've had so many folks, even if they're not in Newark, even if they've just visited or worked in Newark, signing on to support our community. And so it's all to say that folks being able to contact their local officials or calling, let's say the state's governor, shows that this is not an issue isolated to Newark, but it's an issue that it's the reason why we have the EJ law, is an issue that's all throughout our state and all throughout our country as well. So this is just a bit on how to contact to keep going, because the Lake Valley Sewage Commission fourth power plant is still something that we are dealing with as a community, the threat of it, as well as the permit renewals that will be coming up again for our largest garbage incinerator or some of these existing fossil fuel power plants. Thank you.
Thank you, JV. And now this is the part where we want to show you how to stay informed about this whole process with the regulations. So we're going to actually go to the actual website, and those that are watching us on Facebook and those that are here, we're actually going to go to the dep.nj.gov/EJ website. And this website is so important because we want to inform you, we want to engage you, and now this will help to empower you. But you have to learn how to navigate. So when you go to this first DEP site, you take your cursor and put it over New Jersey Acts on EJ. You scroll down, you go back to NJ Acts on EJ, you scroll down to the EJ law. You click the EJ law, and so once you click that, and then you'll stroll down, stroll down, Eric. Stroll down a little bit more. Now you will see the EJ rule procedural overview. This is very important because this will show you the steps of how to walk through this process. So the first objective here is DEP has the determination of applicability, right? So the applicant that submits. So it's a proposed or existing facility that's in one of the 8 facility types that Dr. Nicky Sheats talked about. So this applicant now seeks DEP specific permit or approval. The facility is located or proposes to be located in whole or in part in an overburdened community. And as was stated previously, the overburdened community was outlined in the law. The second procedure in the step is the initial screen. This is important because now once DEP receives the permit application subject to the EJ rule, DEP now provides that initial screening information for the overburdened community. So now this includes 4 steps: the identification of environmental and public health stressors, the appropriate geographic point of comparison, adverse environmental or public health stressors, and whether the OBC, and that's overburdened community, is subject to adverse cumulative stressors, which Dr. Sheats talked about, right? So now the applicant may obtain information directly from EJ map or analyze the stressor data independent of the environmental justice map. So now the third step is the determination of the application requirements, which is crucial. So where the OBC is not subject to adverse cumulative stressors, or the applicant can demonstrate avoidance of disproportionate impact, the applicant would only be required to provide the information required pursuant to the NJAC 71C3-2, or where the overburdened community is already subject to adverse cumulative stressors, or the applicant cannot demonstrate disproportionate impact, would be avoided. The applicant would be required to include both the information required pursuant to NJAC 71C3-2 and the supplemental information required pursuant to the NJAC 71C3-3. Now, this 4th step is important. This is the preparation and review of the environmental justice, this what we call the EGIS impact statement and any additional supplemental information. So the applicant must submit the EGIS, environmental justice, right? Supplemental information as applicable along with public notice documents to DEP. Upon DEP approval, the applicant proceeds with meaningful participation process. Now we fought for this. This is where it's key that those individuals that are impacted and want to participate, this is where it begins, this process begins. So DEP posts the environmental justice impact statement and public notice online. And when I finish these next two steps, I'm going to show you how you could then sign up. So now we're at the most important piece, the meaningful public participation. So now the applicant holds meaningful public participation pursuant to the NJ law, right? Now this one is a 71C4, including public hearing and host overburdened community and a minimum of 60-day public comment period. So you have the ability to participate in the meeting, and now there is a 60-day public comment period for the community. After this step, it goes to DEP for the department review. The applicant provides the environmental justice impact statement with response to comments to the department review. DEP considers the EGIS response to comments and other relevant information to determine whether the facility can avoid a disproportionate impact. This will take a minimum of 45 days for the department to review. Now it goes to the seventh step, which is the department decision. If the facility can avoid disproportionate impact, DEP will authorize the applicant to proceed and impose conditions to ensure disproportionate impact is and remains avoided. Where the facility cannot avoid disproportionate impact, DEP would. Now, this is where it's crucial. If it's a new permit, deny the application for a new facility unless it demonstrates it will serve a compelling public interest in the OBC, right? And we talked about that when we were fighting for the law, what the compelling interest is. Now for expanded facilities, major source renewals authorize applicant to proceed with DEP permitting subject to appropriate conditions to address facility impacts to environmental and public health stresses. So this is all what was discussed when Dr. Sheats went over the history. When you heard JV give some examples of some kind of facilities that are currently in the community that do not fall under regulations yet, but under the administrative order that was in place. This is that 7-step process that is crucial so that we can begin to push back the cumulative impacts of pollutions that our communities suffer from these facilities coming into predominantly low-income Black and Brown communities, right? So this is the gist of it. Now, I want you to scroll back up, Eric. This is the same website. We're going to scroll back up. We're going to go to the NJ. We see how you can get involved. Or you know what, scroll down, Eric, scroll down. Okay, so under the policy piece too, right? These are two, if you wanted to look at the EJ training video that DEP, they had several meetings and some of them that was in Newark, that's a training video that you could look at. And then you could also see it in English and Spanish. That is actually very, very important, right? Now scroll back up. So now what we want you to do is if you want to get involved and attend the meeting, you can click the get involved, you can scroll down. And so this tells you the Slide down a little bit more. Public engagement opportunities. That's coming up in your community, public meetings. We're not going to go here, we're going to go back up. But this is important because this is where you can be informed about everything. And now I'm going to show you one last link on how you now can sign up. So we're going to scroll back up to the top. Attend a meeting. Right, you will click that, scroll down. And so again, you can see engagement sessions, you can see public hearings, and scroll down a little bit, some more, scroll down. So now, right here, this is the EJ Law public hearing. So you click this button, says subscribe to EJ Law. Now, what is important about this is you place your email directly into this link and then you check off. So I live in Essex County. I'm going to check Essex County. Oh, but I have family in Union County, or I might want to know what's happening in Atlantic County. You can check off as many counties that you would like, and then you automatically receive notification. Because one of the problems that we had as residents, and activists fighting for change in our communities, is oftentimes we don't get the information in a timely fashion. And we have to wait for those individuals who are trying to cite some bad facility in our community, an unwanted facility, to notify us. And oftentimes they never do. So now this puts the power in our hand to make sure you put your email address in, click the county in which you reside, so that you will automatically receive those notices. And so this is why, this whole training is important, because we have to begin to advocate, for ourselves and support one another. So there's going to be a series of other trainings that will happen, but we wanted to show you how you can utilize this DEP link. It's a wealth of information on here, because you can also go up, if you go back, and it has resources. And in the resources, it will show you the EJ map. It will show you, if you go slide up, it will show you all of how the stressors, or, just anything that you wanted to know about. You could scroll down, I can show you what's resources, or it's in get involved. And so this is important because, again, you have to learn how to navigate this system, because sometimes you might not be able to reach Dr. Nicky Sheats or JV, Amy Goldsmith, myself, or any of the other activists, right? So you would have the ability to at least navigate yourself through this. And see these resources. It talks about all the different things, in your community that is crucial, right? And so I'm hoping that you will, if you can in your spare time, just kind of visit this website, right? Look at the different tools that DEP has. Look at the different links that's on here, because we want to make sure that you have the ability to have meaningful participation in this process. We want to make sure that you feel comfortable and are empowered with the information, right? That could then prevent the asthma attacks that is happening in our community. Asthma is the silent killer in EJ and overburdened communities. More individuals die, and I could talk about my county, Essex County, in a year than homicides. But what we hear about are the homicides. We don't hear about the individuals. And I told you, and I expressed the national statistic where individuals die every day from asthma, but we don't oftentimes hear about it. And so we are trying to lift up this environmental justice law, the regulations that was just passed, as a way to begin to heal our community and prevent the environmental injustices that are happening each and every day in our communities. We can make our communities healthier, vibrant, and thriving. We have the power to do that. So I want to now open it up for questions. It's 7:45. I want to thank all of our panelists. This day is always important to me. It's the third year that the New Jersey Clean Water Action chapter has been sponsoring World Asthma Day. Next year, it's on May 7th. And so we're going to be planning something. So look for us and, save that date. But it's so important that we begin to address these injustices so that not only can we have environmental health for all, we can have environmental justice for all. If you want to put your questions in the chat, and if there's any other points, Dr. Sheats and JV, that you want to kind of bring up now that I did that presentation, you also can start with that as well. I'll look in the chat. Let me see the first question. So Nikki said, did the rulemaking eliminate the loophole that allows the new pollution if there is a compelling need, or however that loophole was worded?
Well, the compelling public interest exception is still there. But what we were really worried about is that it would also encompass economic considerations. And we were really afraid of business coming in and being able to bribe or extort, as we said, communities by saying, if you take pollution no one else wants and that will kill you and make you ill, we'll give you jobs that other communities have, but you don't have. And we kept that out, and I should give congratulations to DEP. It was not in there in the proposed rule, and they kept it out. Now, having said that, the compelling public interest is still in the rule, and so we're going to have to keep a close eye to make sure that that is interpreted as tightly and as restrictively as possible, so that a whole lot of other types of exceptions do not creep into the law.
One of the things that we did also was we tried to make sure that the compelling public interest was to the benefit specifically of people in that locality, that you can't say, oh, we're going to build this big sewage plant because it's going to help 48 cities and towns. It would have to be something that would be very compelling, that would benefit, make a real benefit to people in the community. Can't really make a real benefit when it's a polluting facility. So we're hoping that we wrote the language tight enough to keep them out.
Thank you. Let me see, is there another question? Not another question. So then we'll start with the panelists. Amy, did you want to kind of add anything else based on the presentation that was given by JV and Dr. Nicky Sheats?
No, I just think that the law and the rule are as good as all of us who hold the government to account. A law means nothing and a rule means nothing if we don't do that. And, we've never won without a fight. So, just because this rule has been passed doesn't mean we can all go home and relax. We wish we all could, but it's just, that's not the way it is. So there are amazing people all over the state, doing incredible work in their neighborhoods. And we hope that this will help make a difference and at least tip the scale towards justice, where it's really been tipped towards polluters time and time again, which has made us all sick. So, keep the rule alive. Don't disappear. And sign up for the notices so that you will actually know when something's being proposed. A lot of times these projects come and nobody knows about it, especially if you're in a community where you don't have a strong organization like ICC or the Alliance, or, in the South Ward, the South Ward Environmental Alliance. If you don't have a good, strong group watching, somebody else has to be that watchdog. So we hope you will be that and sign up and get others to sign up as well.
Yeah, and I think what is also important, I know that Clean Water Action, New Jersey Environmental Justice Alliance, they are statewide organizations. And so Melissa Miles is the executive director of the Alliance. And I know this is something that, you know, we will take this show on the road. And as we did to prepare for the law, we want to make sure that we want to engage the community. And so if you sign up and you're not sure of how you should respond, you know, you have resources with ICC, New Jersey Environmental Justice Alliance, Clean Water Action, Southward Environmental Alliance, NAACP, you know, some of our partner groups who have been working with us. You can reach out to them and then invite us to your community meetings. Eric dropped a link in the chat as a way to get involved. And then there's ways to also take action. And I know on the Facebook page, JV, I have to send you contact information for Jackie Hinkson. She wants to talk to you. I'm looking at Facebook Live and here. So I'll make sure I send you her information. And I'll also forward Jackie, I'll forward you JV information. So I don't see any other questions in the chat. Dr. Sheats, do you want to add anything else?
No, just what Amy said. We're going to have to keep a close eye on how the law is implemented and make sure it's implemented the right way. I'm particularly kind of worried about the companies. They do the hearings, so we don't want it to be cheerleading for the companies. So we have to keep an eye on it. And the fight's not over. We have to also develop and pass complementary policies, or policies that will complement this law to take care of what the law does not take care of.
And JV?
Yeah, I just wanted to add one, thank you all for your time and for having us here in this conversation. I think it's like very much comes down to advocacy in any place that you are throughout the state. Using the EJ mapping tool, you'll see that it's very specific. You can look into certain neighborhoods, but also blocks in your own community that you may not be thinking are exposed to environmental injustice issues, but they are. And so when we think about all the reasons why a community is deemed overburdened, this is an issue of racial injustice. This is an issue of even immigration injustice, language justice, poor people's agenda. This is many intersecting issues. And so I hope that, like everyone said, the work continues, and the work is continuing in solidarity with overburdened communities and your own.
Thank you. And in the chat, Sister Maisha asks, complementary policies, what are some examples, Dr. Sheats?
I'm glad you asked, because we have one we've been trying to get passed as long as cumulative impacts, and it's climate change mitigation policy from an EJ perspective. We call it mandatory emissions reductions. It goes to power plants, the power sector. Power plants contribute to the disproportionate pollution load in EJ communities because they not only emit carbon dioxide, but particulate matter and a host of other air pollutants. And we're trying to convince the state to force those plants whose emissions significantly impact EJ communities, to force those plants to reduce their emissions. And we have not been able to convince the state to do that yet, but that is one example of a complementary policy that would further help EJ communities.
And I know another effort around the port. You want to talk to that?
Were you asking me, or were you going to do it?
Yeah, and direct source. Go ahead.
Yeah, so another complementary policy, something that we've worked together on for it's going on decades right now, on the ports and on warehouses. We're looking at policies like indirect source review, which would enable us to treat the port as if it was a smokestack because of all of the activity, doing one purpose, like the warehouses where there's a concentration of trucks, or along a truck corridor where, it's being used as a funnel for pollution, right, into the community and into the neighborhood. So we're looking at that as a tool. It's part of the Clean Air Act. It's never really been used, except with few exceptions, but it's getting dusted off by a number of different states. And we're hoping that we might be able to use that mostly around diesel and truck and goods movement issues. So that's just another example of a complementary policy.
And I'll drop in the chat, but also say out loud for recording purposes. njdirtysecret.com is information on incineration and some policies that we're looking at on how to mitigate waste away from the incinerator, but additionally, think about the accountability of these facilities, thinking about what standards are going to be set for the renewal process in the future.
Yes, thank you. And Maisha also asked, can talking points be developed for communities? And yes, in the past, we have created talking points and we will continue to do that as well. And we can actually take the 7 steps that I talked about for the regulations. We could actually break that down for talking points so individuals can understand the process and the timeframes as well. I think that was the last question. You know me, if there's no other questions, we said for 1 hour, we have 4 minutes to go, but we will give you 4 minutes back of your time. We thank you for participating. And remember, today is all about raising awareness around asthma, but more importantly about what you can do in your communities to prevent asthma attacks and high increases in asthma among our residents. So stay involved, stay engaged, make sure your voices are being heard, and remember, lift as we climb. I thank each and every one of you for participating as panelists, JV, Nikki, Amy, Eric, thank you for behind the scenes, and looking forward to seeing you soon. Thank you.
Thank you.